Listen, as it stands right now, your idiot league mates are drafting all the wrong wide receivers. We're going to go through 8 of them that you need to be drafting above your idiot league mates based off of paid leagues and based off of the casual platforms. What I mean by that is I looked at all the data. I looked at all the numbers. I looked at where players are being drafted right now on leagues like Underdog Fantasy, FFPC, Best Ball 10s. For those of you that are not familiar with those sites, you have to pay in order to draft right now, right? Some of those leagues are very, very high stakes, very high money. So the drafting positions, the ADPs are a lot sharper. People are really staying on top of their sheesh in order to be drafting in those platforms, as opposed to this side where we have the ESPNs, the Yahoos, the CBSs, the NFLs, those types of platforms, right? So I wanted to compare and find the biggest discrepancies. In this video in particular is going to be wide receivers. Next video, we're going to do this with running backs, so make sure you are subscribed to the channel, and we're going to list off the 8 receivers that have the biggest discrepancy between paid league ADPs and the casual platforms, mock drafts, where people don't have to pay in order to fill that data right now. And I think that will help you draft a lot sharper come your fantasy league, because you know which guys should be going higher, but they're dropping on these platforms. All right, the wide receiver 21 here, but he's a wide receiver 12 here. You should probably just draft him at the wide receiver 16 and enjoy a lot of plus EV. All right, that's what the big dogs are saying in the streets. They use terms like plus EV, and that's what we're doing today. Tuck your shirts in. You know I came pre-tucked because it's the summer. We don't got time for that shit in this economy. The first wide receiver up on this list is Puka Nacua. All right, and the discrepancy is not very large here. He's the wide receiver 7 in paid leagues. He's going as the wide receiver 8, 9 in the more casual leagues. And I know that number can be jarring. If you're just getting back into football, specifically fantasy football, and you're seeing Puka Nacua as the wide receiver 7, a first-round pick, you're going to think to yourself, that's crazy. And I thought the same thing back in, February, March, April, when I was doing best ball drafts on Underdog Fantasy. But the longer that the summer has gone on, the more that ship has sunk, the more I'm on board with Puka as a rock-solid first-round pick, and hopefully I can make that case for you. And I understand hesitancy here, right? Puka was a 5th-round pick. He was a rookie last year. He went into the McVay offense. Cooper Kupp got hurt. He went to BYU, so we were kind of unfamiliar with his game. We kind of thought it was fluky, right? Fluka, Puka. Not the case. If we actually look at what Puka did in college, we'd probably be a lot higher on the kid. You could see this chart from Football Insights. Like in the top right corner, you've got the Marvin Harrisons, the Malik Neighbors, the Tank Dells, and the JSNs, and also Puka just chilling up there. He was fucking incredible in college. If you've ever seen any numbers or stats that bear witness to what Puka did at BYU, he is consistently in the top right, up and right quartile. And it led him to going berserk as a rookie. 160 targets, 105 catches, 1,486 yards, and he only had 6 touchdowns. So there's some meat left on the bone here, right? And this is a tweet from my good friend Ronald Stewart out here. He said, obviously, Puka crushed it this year, but until you put it in perspective, it doesn't fully sink in. He was a day 3 pick next to Cooper Kupp for half of his games and paced with Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson's rookie seasons that propelled them to the top of the position in Dynasty. You look at the PFF receiving grade, you look at the points per game, you look at the yards per route run. There is not a single metric that you can find that tells you that Puka Nacua's year was a fluke whatsoever. And the reason that I'm so confident that it will continue is because of Sean McVay's offense. Sean McVay has been one of the sharpest offensive minds that the NFL has ever seen. And there's a big theme going on throughout the NFL that is pretty much just a printing press for passing production. God damn, that was hard to say on a damn Saturday morning at 8:06 a.m. Eastern time. It is the idea of play action and pre-snap motion in particular. You saw Miami use this to perfection last year, right? They started calling it cheat motion because it's almost impossible to cover. And what you'll see, and this is a chart from Seth Walder of the teams that used the highest percentage of pre-snap motion. Look at the teams on the top of the list. You've got Miami at 68%. The next leading team is the LA Rams at 44%. You'll see a common theme with the best offenses and the best passing offenses at the top of this list because it is the easiest way to get mismatches. It is the easiest way to get your best playmakers in space, get them easy separation, get them against linebackers, and good coaches understand that this is actually a fucking cheat code, and it's not going anywhere for the LA Rams. You could see per Jacob Gibbs. Jacob is a phenomenal follow on Twitter with a lot of really good insight on it. When you look at play action and pre-snap motion, as he also said, pass game cheat codes, you look at just the EPA, you look at the success rate on these plays where you use either of these two. And this is why, yes, maybe you think Puka is a product of the system, but I've got news for you. The system ain't breaking anytime soon. The system is the perfect system. The system is like fucking Amazon delivery, brother. And Puka Nacua is your subscription to your fucking monthly toothpaste. All reports out of camp are that Puka Nacua is the one there. Both of these guys can do really well, but I've got news for you. They're a pretty condensed passing offense. And Matt Stafford loves the guys that he loves. You've seen him break records for fantasy players all over the place. He was the one that was throwing at Calvin Johnson when Calvin Johnson went for 2,000-ish yards. He was the one throwing to Cooper Kupp when Cooper Kupp won the Triple Crown. He was the one throwing to Puka Nacua last year when Puka Nacua ran off the charts with all these rookie records, okay? So Puka Nacua is legit. Puka Nacua is a really strong catcher at the pass. Puka Nacua is a playmaker at the point of attack. Like if you've watched any Rams games last year, if you just watched Red Zone on Sundays, every single Sunday was just Puka making ridiculous catches in traffic, across the middle, diving, contorting his body. His hands are incredible. Some of the strongest hands in the NFL at this point, and he's making plays after the catch, right? That's what like made Cooper Kupp so good, was that this schemed him up to be in space over the middle of the field and have those wide open lanes to run with the ball afterwards. Puka ranked 5th last year in yards after the catch. So he's making the tough catches, and then he's making plays after the fact, okay? So yes, Cooper Kupp likely to be healthy this year. Cooper Kupp likely to eat into the target share a little bit. But I'm telling you, Puka Nacua is going to end up catching 100+, 110+ balls again this year and be a staple for fantasy teams. You're overthinking just how good it was. It was not fluky, and it will not be fluky because the Rams and Sean McVay in this offense just do not allow fluky things to happen. Let us move down to the second wide receiver on this list, and that is Jaylen Waddle of the Miami Dolphins. He is currently going off the board as a wide receiver 15 in paid leagues, but down to wide receiver 19 in the more casual leagues. Now, as I've already alluded to with the pre-snap motion for Puka, that will be a theme of today's video because, like I said, Miami was number one on top of the list. They used pre-snap motion on 68.2% of their plays last year. By far and away, number one in the NFL. Mike McDaniel's got that place bumping. Tyreek Hill is the GOAT, of course, but both of them can succeed. We saw that happen in 2022 when Tyreek Hill went for 1,700 and Jaylen Waddle went for over 1,300, okay? And once again, they just did not add a third weapon or third pass-catching player of consequence to this offense. They gave Jaylen Waddle a bag this offseason. They clearly have a very defined role plan and feel like he is a featured part of this offense going forward. There have been very few wide receivers that have started off their career with 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons. He is one of them. And I think this was maybe one of the more underrated storylines that no one really talked about. And again, going back to quoting both Josh and Hayden from Underdog and, again, Jacob Gibbs, the 2023 Miami Dolphins, first half of games, a 63% pass rate. Second half of games, that dropped down to a 50% pass rate. Raheem Mostert scored 11 of 18 touchdowns in the second halves. This makes complete sense because Miami was doing Miami things last year. In the first half, they would throw the ball at such a high rate. They would make explosive plays. And then they'd just be up big in the second half where they were just milking clock. And this is all to say, like, we have such a strong recency bias towards Jaylen Waddle. He was incredible in 2022. Like, led the NFL in yards per reception, led the NFL in most efficiency metrics at the wide receiver position. And then he got hurt last year a bunch. He was banged up the entire year. He was in and out of games. He missed multiple games because of various injuries, okay? And now we're holding that against him. Now, you might say, like, okay, maybe they'll just do the same thing again and not have to throw the ball in the second half. I am worried about the Miami Dolphins defense. They were good last year, but don't forget, Christian Wilkins is now in Las Vegas. Bradley Chubb is coming off of his third ACL tear that happened on December 31st. Jalen Phillips tore his Achilles in Week 12 last year. I don't know if any of their pass rushers, their defensive line is going to be a shell of what it was last year, at least for like the first 2 months of the season, as these guys recover and get back to full strength, hopefully, if that even happens. So I am way, way further down on Miami's defense than I think what the majority of people are expecting them to be. So at the end of the day, I just think the average fantasy player is going to overemphasize Waddle's injury-filled 2023, and that tends to happen in the more casual leagues. They just look back at last year. They think of like, who did I have last year? Did he do well? Did he not do well? I'm not really going to look at the numbers going into this year or dive into the context like my man's Jacob Gibbs does over here, and those guys tend to fall down the list. But as he said, don't be scared. Dolphins splits with both Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle on the field together. Now, of course, Hill tops him, but these numbers, objectively, if you took Hill out of this picture and just looked at Waddle's numbers, and I told you, hey, Waddle's going to get a 27% target share, a 37% air yard share in a Miami Dolphin offense that takes shots downfield, that runs at a fast pace, that uses all this pre-snap motion, you would be wildly excited about it. And the last thing that I will kind of cover here is Matt Harmon did Jaylen Waddle's reception perception profile this offseason, and I was expecting it to be a bad one because of all the injuries, but this was by far and away his best success rate season of his career. Like, he jumped up to be a super well-rounded separator all over the field. Man success rate over the 71st percentile, zone in the 85th. He's always been good at that. Even versus press, where he really struggled because he's a smaller receiver, he jumped over the 68th percentile. So he is now a well-rounded, all-around wide receiver. I think Jaylen Waddle's in for a huge bounce back year. So we love Puka. We love Jaylen Waddle. If you want to get the full list of dudes that we love at every single position and every type of scoring setting, that is available in the BDGE draft guide, which goes live this upcoming week on August 1st. All right. It is available to purchase on BDGE.co for a discounted price up until August 1st. Then it goes to full price. But you can always get it at a super discounted price by going to underdogfantasy.com, downloading the Underdog Fantasy app, and depositing $10 or more using promo code BDGE, okay? So that's the cheapest way to get the draft guide, but you're also getting a bunch of deposit bonus matches on Underdog Fantasy where you can do a bunch of best ball drafts and get a little bit sharper with the ADP and get more familiar with where these guys are going higher than your home leagues, the ESPN leagues, whatnot, so you can get more familiar with the trends throughout the summer. So Underdog Fantasy right now, if you use our code BDGE, you'll get the draft guide emailed to you free on August 1st. You'll get bonuses on your account, so you'll have more than $10 to play with on there. And they'll give you a free square for week 1. I believe it's Patrick Mahomes over 0.5 passing yards. So you've got an auto free square bet on there. It is the best deal out in the fantasy world. UnderdogFantasy.com, promo code BDGE when you deposit $10 or more, or go to BDGE.co. Let's move to Christian Watson. All right. He is currently the wide receiver 40 on paid leagues. He's wide receiver 43 in non-paid leagues. Now, I don't know that I can make a super strong case for why I love Christian Watson. He's one of the more polarizing players in fantasy football. He's not a super sharp target of mine, but I will be trying to sprinkle in some shares of Christian Watson if I'm in a bunch of leagues, right? This is the second year in a row now that he has dealt with lower body injuries, hamstrings in particular, that have really made him stiff and made it hard for him to produce on a consistent basis. The larger concern for me here is the same concern I have with a lot of offenses, whether it's like Seattle or whoever. Who is really going to suck up all the targets here? Because they had Jaden Reed, who broke the fuck out. You got Romeo Doubs, who everyone thinks is boring as shit, but he's clearly not going anywhere. Like, the Packers love him. Jordan Love absolutely loves him. And then you have Dontavian Wicks, who broke out as a rookie as well and played really well. And that's all before bringing up the emergence of both Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft as tight ends that they drafted last year. So you have a lot of really successful rookies that are now making their way into the target share. Josh Jacobs will probably command a lot of early down carries. Last year, Matt LaFleur ran 12 personnel on 32% of their plays. 12 personnel is 2 tight ends, 2 wide receivers, 1 running back. So 32% of the time they were in 12 personnel, which was the 3rd highest rate in the league. And maybe that had to do with Christian Watson being banged up. Maybe that had to do with, some of the other receivers missing time and whatnot. But maybe he's looking at the personnel and thinking that's the best thing for him. When you're looking at the numbers, when everybody's on the field together, Watson is running a lot of routes. He's typically a 75 to 80% route runner when they're in 2 wide receiver sets, around the same when they're in 3 wide receiver sets. So they do sprinkle the ball around. They do let everybody kind of run. And I think it's a good strategy from a real life NFL standpoint, right? If you have 3, 4, 5, 6 good pass catchers, why not keep them all fresh and keep them all moving all the time? So it's kind of like a luxury of goods they got going on here, which is the big concern I have. But at the same time, Christian Watson is such a playmaker where he does not rely on high volume. But that's also kind of my concern, right? He had that stretch. We're all we're all absolutely in love with Christian Watson, or we were at least, because of this 4-game stretch he had as a rookie. Don't forget, bro, he scored 8 touchdowns in a 4-game stretch as a rookie, which is 62% of his career touchdowns. All right. So it's possible that him as a player is just a little flukier than we want to come to terms with. But it's also possible that Jordan Love is who the Packers think he is, given they just gave him about $1 billion. And Christian Watson is an explosive playmaker just tied to a very, very, very good young QB. And maybe we're overthinking it there. So I don't really lean one way or the other on Christian Watson, because I think there are green flags and I think there are red flags, but he is going much higher in paid leagues than he is in casual leagues. So just note that. The next dude up on this list is Brian Thomas Jr. Not too dissimilar from Christian Watson, actually. He is a long, lean, fast playmaker, super athletic out of LSU. He was the 23rd overall pick to the Jacksonville Jaguars this year. 6'3", 210 pounds, ran a 4.33 40. Now, on paper, this addition makes so much sense. Like, listen to these numbers right quick. You have Calvin Ridley and Zay Jones no longer in Jacksonville. Jacksonville is entering the 2024 season with the second most vacated air yards, over 3,000 air yards available in this offense, nearly 3,200. The 5th most overall targets, over 250 targets available from last year's group of players, and the highest rate of vacated targets inside the opponent's 10-yard line. So you're talking about when we're near the end zone, almost all the guys that they threw targets to last year are gone, 56.3%. So like I said, the addition of Brian Thomas Jr. makes so much sense because he is a phenomenal deep threat. He just led the country in college with 17 receiving touchdowns. And last year, Trevor Lawrence attempted the 3rd most deep passes, 20-plus yards in the air downfield of all quarterbacks. On film, I thought Brian Thomas Jr. felt like a high-end wide receiver 2 in an offense. I actually remember making the comp when I first started watching his film back in like February. Straight up, I remember on his player, like the notepad I did for him, I was like, he would be the perfect Buffalo Bill to play opposite Stephon Diggs, because he is what the Bills wanted Gabriel Davis to be. And now, he moves over to Jacksonville. They did sign Gabriel Davis 3 years through $39 million. And I think that's just to make sure that one of these guys fills the role. They are filling the 2nd most vacated air yards. When you think about air yards, you think about shots down the field. That is what I think about for Brian Thomas. When you think about targets inside the 10, a 6'3", 210-pound dude who just scored 17 touchdowns, that is Brian Thomas. So I think the one concern I have with BTJ and Gabriel Davis coming is that we see a lot of NFL teams, these players like veteran differential treatment, okay? And that could happen with Gabe Davis. Like, Gabe Davis could run 80% of the routes for the first 8 weeks of the season, while BTJ is more of like a 50, 60% player. But I do think the likelihood of him breaking out over the second half of the year is really, really high. So he's one of those dudes that I'd be willing to draft and then just sit on, knowing that he's not going to play well in the beginning of the year. I don't remember if I actually mentioned this, but he's currently going off the board at wide receiver 45 in paid leagues and wide receiver 51 in non-paid leagues. So there is like a 6-7 rank gap there that I think you can take advantage of. BTJ, the GOAT, the truth. Curtis Samuel, also maybe the GOAT and or the truth. Going off the board as wide receiver 50 right now in paid leagues, wide receiver 54 in more casual leagues. Curtis Samuel goes over to the Buffalo Bills, who have lost basically all of their targets. I talk about how Jacksonville is the 2nd most vacated, 5th most vacated, and all these. The Buffalo Bills are pretty much number 1 in vacated targets, air yards, air yard share, all that kind of shit. Bills are gone because Josh Allen spent so many of his passes going towards Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis. Those dudes have taken up so many targets over the last few years, and now the Bills add Curtis Samuel, they add Keon Coleman, they add a bunch of cones like MVS and Chase Claypool and those types of dudes. Some of those guys will get cut, but the one player I am confident will be a very, very high snap player in this offense is Curtis Samuel at the wide receiver position. Reports out of camp so far have been like really, really high on Curtis Samuel. He's always been a really good separator. He was a really good playmaker for Washington last year. I think if they put Curtis Samuel in the slot for Buffalo, he's going to excel and have games where he sees 10, 12, 14 targets, because we've always seen that from Josh Allen. When he is a slot guy that he likes, whether it was fucking Emmanuel Sanders, Isaiah McKenzie, Cole Beasley, they had these crazy blow-up games for absolutely no reason, and I think they are void of real weapons right now in the passing game, real proven weapons, all right? Like, Kincaid should eat. James Cook should be super involved. Those guys are fun, but Curtis Samuel, I think, will be the guy at the end of the year that we're like, fuck, I wish I took more of him. So Curtis Samuel's a dude that you need to be targeting before your idiot league mates. And speaking of your idiot league mates, if you're the commissioner of your league, or even if you're not the commissioner, being the commissioner kind of stinks, all right? And mostly because you got to communicate with 18 people and grab money from 17 other people. I don't know if you guys have ever used LeagueSafe, but LeagueSafe.com is like the single greatest invention in the fantasy space that I've come across. If you're the commissioner, you can set up your league on LeagueSafe, and then all you're doing is sending a link. That's it. You drop a link in your group chat and be like, everybody pay here. And the settings are really customizable. So you could put the buy-in, say like, our league buy-in is $100. Here is how the prizes split out at the end of the year. You set up your league with all the settings that you want. You send it to the group chat, and it's done. And it doesn't cost you anything. And the single best part about this, if you are a commissioner and you use the link down below to sign up on LeagueSafe, you're getting $50 of your buy-in back to you. So if your league is a $50 buy-in, you are playing in your league for free if you set it up on LeagueSafe through our link. This is no strings attached. So set your league up on LeagueSafe through the link down below, 10 people, 12 people, whatever. Send it to your homies. If it's a $100 buy-in, guess what? You got $50 off. So you're playing for half price. You're playing with house money. All right, so set your league up on LeagueSafe. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. I would not yap about it if I did not believe in the product. We run all of our BDGE Dynasty leagues and redraft leagues through LeagueSafe, and I know the guys that run it. It is super secure. It is super simple. It is the easiest way to get your league up, going, and not having to worry if you are a commissioner. So if you're not a commissioner, just send it to your commissioner. He will thank you. He will kiss you. He will give you smoochies all over the place. Use the link down below. Code BDGE will get you $50 free on your buy-in if you are the commissioner, all right? LeagueSafe.com. RashidShaheed.com. Next wide receiver on this list, currently going off the board, wide receiver 52 in paid leagues, 61 on the non-paid leagues. Now, here's the thing about Rashid Shaheed and this New Orleans Saints offense. I'll lay out the red flags and the concerns. One, Derek Carr, absolute cone. This offensive line is going to be really bad, right? They were already going to be really bad, and now Ryan Ramczyk is out for the year, so they're going to be really, really, really bad. They're like the 30th ranked offensive line. Those are numbers that we will have in our draft guide, again, Underdog Fantasy. But the one lone bright spot of this offense is their new offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak, the son of Gary Kubiak. He was the former passing game coordinator for the 49ers. And heading back to the main theme of this video, last year, the 49ers used, pre-snap motion, play action at the third highest rate in the entire NFL, while the New Orleans Saints ranked 26th, using at only 14.3% of their plays. With this new offense being installed in New Orleans, you can imagine they're going to use a lot more of that. Rashid Shaheed is the perfect type of player to get in motion and get him clear separation and get him on a runway before the play starts, because his speed is blazing. It is game breaking. All right. So if they use him more in pre-snap motion, while the offensive line might get dominated, play action tends to help with that a ton. And Rashid Shaheed will be able to get open quickly as he's already in motion. So Shaheed's coming off of like 2 solid seasons, which he's progressed year over year over year. He will be the clear number 2 in this offense behind Chris Olave, at least on the outside. Kamara is going to eat up a lot of targets, of course. But Shaheed is absolutely a high upside target once you start hitting the 10th, 11th, 12th round in drafts. 2 more guys that we'll kind of rattle off quickly. We've got Jermaine Burton, who is a rookie out in Cincinnati. He's currently getting picked wide receiver 71 in paid leagues, 81 in non-paid leagues. He's a super talented wide receiver, but he's not. He comes out of Alabama. You'll probably not be familiar with him unless you're really into college football. He's not like the typical Alabama wide receiver that we've kind of become accustomed to seeing come out, where it's, Devonta Smith, Jaylen Waddle, Mark Cooper, Julio Jones, like the guys that are just all world talents. But I would argue that he is as good of a separator as most of the dudes that come out into the NFL. Matt Harmon did a reception perception profile on him, and he is a phenomenal separator. 86th percentile versus man, 86th percentile against press coverage. He also has arguably the strongest hands in the entire draft class. Like, he led the NCAA with a 97.4% on-target catch rate without a single drop this year on an insane 20.2 average depth of target. When you are catching everything thrown your way at the line of scrimmage, it's cool, but it's not that impressive. When your average depth of target is over 20 yards downfield and you do not drop anything, that speaks to me, okay? He caught 56.3% of targets in traffic. That is an extremely high rate. At the end of the day, the Bengals just know how to draft wide receivers. I will say that the drawback here, of course, you're getting him at wide receiver 70. It's going to be tough to get targets behind Jamar Chase, behind T. Higgins, and Andre, I don't know how to say his last name, Iosova, I believe, had a really strong 4-touchdown rookie year and is getting a lot of love at camp. So I think there's a real battle between Andre and Jermaine Burton for the wide receiver 3 role here. I think both of them are good players. I would actually probably split the difference. If I'm drafting on underdog doing best ball, I would take one of the two as my 17th, 18th round pick in every other draft. One of those two is gonna play really well this year. And the last dude up on this list, we have Wan'dale Robinson, wide receiver 72, getting picked wide receiver 82 in these non-primo leagues. Now, here's the thing. I wouldn't really target him unless I'm in a full PPR league, but he is going to be 2 years removed now from his ACL tear. We love drafting players 2 years removed, not 1 year removed from the ACL tear. And that's a huge positive. And remember, the Giants took him in the 2nd round. Now, the big negative here is that Daniel Jones is feeding him balls. Pause. The passing game won't be great. Malik Neighbors is going to vacuum up the majority of targets, but the wide receiver 2 role in New York is completely up for grabs. They have a bunch of unproven young weapons, and Robinson's going to be their slot wide receiver. He had a sneaky 60 catches last year, okay? 60 catches. That really went under the radar for me. I think he could build on and flirt with a spot in your PPR fantasy lineups if things break right for him in New York this year, all right? So Wan'dale Robinson is a very, very late round pick in PPR leagues that I think you should be targeting, but I think you should be targeting all of these players. All these players you need to be looking at because they are so far down the boards on the ESPNs, the Yahoos, the CBSs, the NFLs.coms, but they are up there when you're in the sharp leagues, on Underdog, on FFPC, all those type beats, all right? So I leave you with that. I hope you guys enjoyed. Hit the button that looks like this if you did. Make sure you subscribe because we'll be doing the same video tomorrow as it relates to running backs. And again, our draft guide will be live on August 1st. The least expensive way to get it, Underdog Fantasy. Download the app. Use promo code BDGE. $10 or more will get you the draft guide free, plus some deposit bonuses, plus a free square for week 1. It is the best deal in the industry, all right? I'm out of here. I love you. Smoochies.